there. Time for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are Miguel Delaney, Chief Football Writer for The Independent, and the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein. Welcome to you both. Let's run through the back pages. We'll start with The Sun. They lead with Thomas Tuchel preparing to speak face-to-face to all the players on his squad long list. That's somewhere close to 60 players. They also touch on Scotland's showdown with Denmark and Fabio Wardley's incredible rise to become the new WBO heavyweight champion. Anthony Joshua's remarkable showdown with Jake Paul is under scrutiny in the Telegraph, with serious concerns for the YouTuber's safety. They also cover the Ashes and Elliot Anderson's future. Nottingham Forest saying they will adopt a tough stance on whether he's allowed to leave the club. Plenty of variety here on the back page of the newspaper. Again, Thomas Tuchel's need to talk with the fringe players is prominent for them. And how about this? The Republic of Ireland's miraculous win in Budapest, still making waves. Miguel's piece in The Independent explains why Troy Parrott's last gasp goal meant more than anyone can comprehend. What a victory that was. Yeah, quite a bit to discuss, but let's start with England. And Thomas Tuchel says he's going to be doing the rounds. He's going to be speaking to all the players on his long list. Some are up to 60 players. He wants to talk to them face-to-face, ideally. He doesn't want to call them. He wants to see their expression, so maybe even FaceTime will do, he says, Miguel. That's a lot of players to get around. What do you make of this approach? And how many of those players, the likes of, Jack Grealish, perhaps even Danny Welbeck, will that help?
Well, a lot of players, yes, as you've said, but also because he's got a lot of time. I mean, just as a little bit of a tangent, it's one of the strange things with the calendar right now, especially given, I suppose, the complaints about the frequency of international breaks at this time of year. We have 3 in very quick succession that disrupt the domestic season, and then nothing for months, which would seem to maybe it's not necessarily the best for the World Cup itself, given there's such gaps between where the teams are now and where they will be in June without too much in between. And from that perspective, I think it's obviously pretty much the most constructive thing that Tuchel can do, because I mean, for all sorts of obvious reasons, not least players going to be some players going to be in completely different form by May. This isn't going to be Tuchel's final squad. Yes, he gives them an idea of it, but so much can change. And within that context, I think it's rational and it's quite proactive, I would say, and a good man management decision for Tuchel to speak with every individual player not in it right now and basically set the threshold of what they need to do. I think that it also keeps a bit of a kind of maybe a nice tension to the squad in this long build-up, because anyone in it now, and again with the Jude Bellingham situation, which we will get onto, that does show that there are very, very, very few players that are guaranteed a place, and that almost anyone can be dropped. So yeah, I think it's absolutely right. He encourages all those left out to basically or give them a target to show what they can do to get back in.
Yeah, places clearly still up for grabs in this squad, David. And when we look at the players that have missed out in recent squad selections, like Jack Grealish and perhaps Harry Maguire, outside calls for Danny Welbeck to come in as well. Do you think they might respond well to getting this feedback and finding out what they can do to get back into the team?
Yeah, I think it can only be a good thing. Thomas Tuchel was surprisingly anguished by the end of this international year. And he spoke post-match yesterday, sort of saying he had to wish them Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Won't see you until sort of springtime. And for somebody that's been in club management only before this job, it really was a foreign feeling for him. And it shows how attached he's become to this. He's come to this job. But also, as Miguel points out, it's eminently sensible, because you don't know what's going to happen around form and fitness. And even though his contract is only until the end of this World Cup, with the stated aim of winning the competition, so no real long-term thinking in that, he wants to cultivate this feeling of togetherness and a brotherhood. And the player that he points to in the pieces you'll see in the papers and online and in the next days is Trent Alexander-Arnold, who of course is at Real Madrid. He's arguably one of the most talented players that England have at their disposal. He's suffered from injuries of late. But with Reece James taking that sort of first choice slot for now at right back, many people may have thought that Trent Alexander-Arnold is out of the reckoning, but clearly not, as Tuchel points out in these quotes. And he'll be going to see or speak to the likes of Alexander-Arnold and all of those that sort of have been around the periphery. And you'd imagine that would include somebody like Cole Palmer as well. And he's tried a number of players at left back, although Nico O'Reilly got the slot on this occasion. And so despite it seeming to many of us that the team is pretty much set in stone with a couple of uncertainties over maybe who takes the number 10 role, who starts on the left and who is at left back, there's all sorts of variables that mean that Tuchel is right to be doing this. And it's such a difficult tournament in terms of what the climate's going to be like, how England are going to be shaping up when it actually comes around, that this will probably be well received by the players and it will give them something to strive towards heading towards March and then the summer.
Yeah, Miguel, there's been some criticism, hasn't there, of Thomas Tuchel and his man management. Of course, we've seen under the spotlight his relationship with Jude Bellingham come under, quite some scrutiny. The fact that he's going on tour, as The Guardian put it, is this some way of perhaps appeasing himself and improving on his man management skills?
I mean, he can be frank. He can be surprisingly blunt both to us in kind of like, behind closed doors and also just when cameras are on him. And that can potentially create issues. I mean, like, say he's had to apologise for the use of the word repulsive in reference to what his mother thought of Bellingham, although I do think that was a little bit overblown. But from everything I hear, though, I must say, and I assume David's the same, that the players actually really like him. They really like how he deals with them. I mean, he's a charismatic figure. And, I mean, okay, look, in previous jobs, in high-profile club jobs, after 18 months, I suppose, maybe a certain intensity has started to cause a friction. But even still, you used to always hear stories of players were enthralled to him. Neymar, who's had a tumultuous career given his talents, well, I mean, like, he can point to Tuchel as bringing out the best form of his decade at the top. And that seems to be the vibe right now. I think mostly a story like this feeds into this idea. Also, even on the Bellingham thing, I have to say, I mean, we're going to discuss it, but I think he's actually done a generally quite a good job with that, I have to say.
Why so?
Because I think it set the right tone for the squad. It's immediately set a message that these are the standards you have to meet with England. Essentially, like what he really did was show, in contrast to 30 years, or most of the last 30 years of the English national team's history. Maybe you would consider like some of Southgate's time a break from this, but it has been quite an individual-led, star-led side. How many times have we heard the quote-unquote golden generation talk about the problems this led to? And in his first competitive games, he's basically sent a message that's ended. Now, I think even with Bellingham himself, it's got a reaction. Maybe there's also a sense that from Tuchel's point of view, and I'm just surmising here, that a Bellingham who feels he has something to prove is actually a better Bellingham than one that necessarily thinks he's settled into the squad or has a guaranteed place. And and you can even see it, I suppose, in the response this week. I think he's set the right tone with all that.
David, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, because I feel like this conversation about the relationship between Tuchel and Bellingham is just going to rumble on and on and on. Could it be a distraction for the other players in the squad as they look to go into a major tournament next summer?
I don't really think so among the sort of people that I've spoken to around the England setup and the wider environment, because they like Jude Bellingham. He's popular, understandably so. He's an absolutely brilliant player, and we've seen what he does on the big occasions for club and country. And, you imagine that he'll be there or thereabouts for starting in that number 10 role. But even if it's Morgan Rogers, I don't think many of us would have complaints. They're two outstanding talents and from the same generation and really close friends. Maybe seems more of a distraction in our industry, the media and the wider sort of fan base. because Jude Bellingham is being spoken about so much, like disproportionately so compared to other players. And you understand it. He obviously was a high-profile omission from the previous squad, but that was more related, I think, to him coming back to fitness. And there was obviously the unfortunate repulsive comment and various other bits and bobs. Even last night, some conjecture over his body language on the pitch, and then Tuchel addressed it in his news conference. Tuchel's not backwards in coming forwards. He's not shied away from commentating on the Bellingham situation. You may think some coaches might have tried to sort of sweep it under the carpet and move the questions on, but he fronts up every time, and he seems to, let's be honest, treat players quite equally. Jed Spence has been in sort of hot water with him for his reaction towards Thomas Frank. So I don't think it's a singling out from Tuchel, maybe from the sort of outside of the England environment. And look, it's a great position for England to be in, to have somebody of Bellingham's ability and potential. And I'm sure he'll make another major impact at the World Cup. But in terms of the other players, no. I mean, judging by their performances, it's zero distraction. They've flown through this qualification campaign. It's been unblemished. Okay, Bellingham hasn't been quite as heavy a part of that, largely because of the shoulder surgery he underwent. And I think whatever role he plays next summer, which I think will be a significant one, England stand a really good chance of going far. And they have to, because of their potential and because of the stated aim to win the tournament.
Of course, and that is what Thomas Tuchel has been brought in to do. David, Miguel, thank you for the moment. We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll look ahead to a huge game for Scotland. The Times goes big on Anthony Joshua's fight with YouTuber Jake Paul and says there are big concerns over the mega money showdown. Stay with us. Hello again, you're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to my guest, Miguel Delaney, chief football writer for The Independent, and The Athletic's football correspondent, David Ornstein. OK, let's talk Scotland. Back page of The Sun, top right-hand corner of the page, Scott's Night of Destiny, they say. Steve Clarke has told his Scotland stars to embrace the pressure of the winner-takes-all World Cup showdown against Denmark. Now, Miguel, we know that this Scotland team has a lot of talent. How much will the mental aspect of this one come into it, the pressure that they're under to deliver? They haven't been to a World Cup for 28 years.
Yeah, we saw that on Sunday, what that way can do with Hungary. Hadn't been there since 1986. And while we'll get to Ireland, I was having a discussion about this today with some Scottish colleagues about how, say, despite Scotland's, you'd say, a return to respectability over the past 8 years, after what has been a difficult millennium, they still really haven't had any big moments, really, since, what, I mean, you might say the early 1990s. I mean, we were trying to think of some earlier. Craig Burley's goal against Norway, the manner of qualification for Euro 2020, but it's still a little bit thin compared to even a country like Ireland, who have been really up and down this decade. And I think that feeds into what Clarke is saying there about seizing the moment. I would say they're due one. They've got a moment's player in Scott McTominay, who's also a very good player. Now, I know there's been a bit of debate in Scotland as well about whether Clarke's football is even conducive to seizing a moment. But I think there's opportunity here. I mean, because really, Denmark should have been pretty much secure from this situation, given the weekend's fixtures. But they really badly slipped up at home with a 2-2 draw to Belarus. And while it doesn't change too much for Scotland, it does maybe change the kind of the feeling around Denmark. And I do think there's a real opportunity here. But again, it does come back to not just seizing the moment, but creating one, maybe a first really big one in the millennium, and this millennium, and maybe since the 1980s.
Yeah, you see the back page of the Eye. They also cover this on the left-hand sidebar. They say, write your own history, Boss Clarke tells Scotland team. They will be without Billy Gilmore, though, David. How much of a loss will that be?
Yeah, I think that's a real shame, Jess. But obviously Scott McTominay in there, who's been heroic, really, for them. And not to mention Napoli as well, since his move from Manchester United. John McGinn, talismanic, and Andy Robertson as well. And, you know, Shea Adams up front, massive night for him ahead. I think the Times headline is Scotland holds its breath, and that really does feel the case. You know, no World Cup since 1998, despite qualifying for the last 2 Euros. And you've got, you know, Steve Clarke talking about potential sort of divine inspiration. And it was a very strange night over the weekend, and losing, but having luck on their side with the other result, and their qualification campaign has had some pretty low moments. I mean, even despite a win at home, they were getting booed off when they were leading against Greece. I think there were some grumblings from the crowd as they went in at half time. But tomorrow night, the whole nation and beyond is going to be sort of willing them on, and 50 odd thousand crowd inside Hampden Park is going to be absolutely electric. It promises to be one of the noisiest nights and potentially one of the most famous nights. And I think from a British perspective, and the crowds over in the States, we'll come on to talk about Ireland, but if the Scots get there, it really will be quite something. Yeah, it's a huge loss without Billy Gilmour, but they've still got the capabilities of doing this.
Yeah, imagine the Tartan army going over in force over to the United States, Canada and Mexico. Absolutely brilliant. OK, we have to talk about the Republic of Ireland, because, my goodness me, what an incredible matchup they had over the last couple of days. Miguel, you've written about this in your newspaper, The Eye. It's just phenomenal what Troy Parrott and these Irish players were able to achieve. And you've written so well, so expertly here about the history of this Irish team and how it is intimately linked, their success, with the state of the country. Exceptional what they've achieved.
Yeah, I mean, just to sum it up, I suppose, obviously, as people can tell from my accent, I am half grew up in Ireland. And my previous, my main job now at The Independent when I do international football is covering England, but it used to be covering Ireland when I worked in Irish media. But I have to say, because of the way the team has gone, this is the first time I was really, really envious not to be there. It was a moment that got out in Irish football history. And all the more so because it was so unexpected. I mean, there was the state of the group. Halfway through this campaign, Ireland had 1 point, and with 3 games left, and they looked like a poor side, especially after that defeat to Armenia. You know, someone like Troy Parrott, who had been considered Ireland's great hope, but his career had seemed to drift. You know, the way he left Tottenham Hotspur, was reviving himself at AZ Alkmaar, and that had seemed reflective, I suppose, of how Ireland just wasn't producing the same quality of players anymore. Like they don't even really have a McTominay now. And that's from a lineage that for about 80 years, from Jackie Carey to Roy Keane, arguably even Robbie Keane, always had a world-class player. It comes from a failure, I suppose, to maximise the glory era from 1988 to 2002. There's all sorts of discussion you could have about the lack of infrastructure in Irish football. You know, there's been a lot of issues with the federation that have been the subject of government inquiries. So all of this came together for, to be honest, a week that should really have been impossible. Yeah, I think it's testaments to the spirit of the players. Actually, the quiet effect of Hamir Halgerson, the surprising Irish manager, and what seemed almost a superficial attempt to recreate the magic that Jack Charlton created by appointing, at the time, an unfancied foreign manager or an outsider who wasn't that known. And he wasn't a 1966 World Cup winner. And yet it all came together in a week unlike any I've known. And even the manner of Sunday's display. I mean, not just a 96-minute winner, but a 96-minute winner after twice going behind and being 2-1 down in what looked like, again, a performance that was drifting with 10 minutes left. But up popped Troy Parrott, looking to finally maximise, I think, that real street football quality that he's absolutely got and that the country should have been maximising more of. But he's forced it through himself and written himself into Irish history. And, OK, we now wait a playoff in March. I actually think it's a pity and something to be criticised FIFA for, that we have to wait so long for the playoffs. I mean, it could actually have a distorting effect on the way all of the playoffs go. But Ireland have this. I think the biggest thing to say is it feels like the country's national team has been reborn, and certainly to have a spirit for whoever they play in March.
Yeah, good luck to whoever they play in March if they can keep this momentum going. David, it's a type of feel-good story that we love about football. They have still, of course, to get through a playoff bout if they are to make it to the World Cup. But you want to see Ireland there. You want to see the Irish fans there, don't you?
Well, not least the the expats and the Irish in the States. It will be quite something. Anybody who's spent time over there will know just what an atmosphere that will produce. And some of us are old enough to remember the '94 World Cup when they were there, and Ray Houghton, etc. But it's incredible, and I loved reading Miguel's piece. And there's a great piece in the Times talking about the backstory of Troy Parrott and some pretty difficult upbringings of players like him, and coming over to Tottenham and it not really working out there, many loan spells, and made his way to Holland where it's now working for him. And it'd be interesting to see, I think 18 goals for club and country this season. So he's only 23 years old. He feels like he's been around for ages, and it'd be interesting to see if he ends up getting a move in January or next summer. And across that Irish team, some sort of unsung heroes there, and the scenes of celebration were really quite something. But I guess it won't count for nothing if they don't get there, but it will take the gloss off of it. I think there's a lot of goodwill behind Ireland finishing the job now, and you wouldn't want to be on the opposing team in the playoffs against them.
Be fantastic to see them at a World Cup finals. OK, we're going to talk boxing now because a bit of an unexpected story in that Britain's Fabio Wardley will be elevated to WBO heavyweight champion. That's because Alexander Usyk has vacated his WBO title. Miguel, what do you make of this? It's been a good couple of weeks for Fabio Wardley.
Yeah. I was just on to some of our boxing writers today, to give me the proper kind of insight into it. I mean, it's obviously great for British boxing in the sense they have another world heavyweight champion. But I suppose out of slightly curious circumstances, and even the way Wardley himself would want to challenge himself against Usyk, but this is very much up in the air. So it's going to be interesting to see who Wardley does end up fighting, but he himself offers plenty of entertainment. So, a good story for British boxing, if a slightly curious one as well.
Yeah, and let's stay with boxing, David, because everyone's going to be talking about this one. Anthony Joshua against a YouTuber in Jake Paul. Going to the back page of the Times, Joshua to face YouTuber in US for £70 million. This is due to take place in Miami. I mean, this is going to be divisive. What's your take on this?
Biggest, most divisive, sort of strange, bizarre story of the day. Firstly, on safety grounds, there's been huge reaction, including carried all over Sky Sports News today, about Jake Paul's potential sort of safety. There's a significant disparity in weights. Joshua's going to have to come down, Paul up. Experience, punch power that Joshua is far more powerful on, and questions about what it means for his legacy, what it means for boxing. Does it sort of discredit it? And the purists, the traditionalists may think so. On the flip side, adapting to the modern era and new audiences, and the numbers that Paul against Mike Tyson racked up, over 100 million viewers. This will be far in excess of that, I'm sure, and the money that comes with it for Anthony Joshua in particular. You might say, how much does he need? But it's not an insignificant thing to turn down, and I'm not sure many people would. And especially if this is then going to lead to Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua next year, which it sounds like talks are really stepping up on that one. So, yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And I think despite all the controversy, we're probably going to be glued to it.
Yeah. Do you know what, David? I think you might be right. David Ornstein, Miguel Delaney, thank you very much for joining us on Backpages. A pleasure to have your company. If you missed any of the show, there's another chance to see Backpages at hour. The show is also available as a podcast. As always, just download Backpages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On Tuesday night, our guests will be John Cross and Riyad Al Samurai.